Death row for a single murder, but by his own admission, he killed so many people over the years he lost count.
The rush. I didn't do it for the sex.
Can you admit that you shot him in cold blood?
Yes.
Let's see. So there must have been something in you that was getting you to do
Oh, you
that.
are lost, Nick!
I wish that I could take every bit of hurt on myself.
Number 16. Michael Lee Wilson. The Michael Lee Wilson case is a chilling tale of a heinous crime that shocked the state of Oklahoma in 1995. Wilson was involved in the brutal slaying of Richard Yost, a Tulsa convenience store clerk, during a callous robbery that forever altered the lives of those involved. The incident unfolded late one fateful night when Wilson, along with three co-defendants, Anthony Bryan, Darwin Brown, and Billy Don Alverson, hatched a sinister plan to rob the store. Armed and filled with ill intent, they stormed into the establishment, terrorizing both customers and employees. In a ruthless act of violence, they shot Richard Yost multiple times, leaving him to die in a pool of his own blood. The callous nature of the crime sent shockwaves through the community, prompting an intense investigation by law enforcement. Eventually, the four perpetrators were apprehended and the case went to trial. The evidence against them was overwhelming and they were all found guilty of first-degree slaying. During the trial, it was revealed that Wilson and his accomplices showed little remorse for their actions. Their criminal histories and violent pasts further painted a bleak picture of their characters, solidifying the severity of their crimes. The prosecution sought the ultimate punishment and all four defendants were sentenced to their demise. Michael Lee Wilson was executed in Oklahoma on January 9, 2014. His punishment took place at the Oklahoma State Penitentiary in McAlester, Oklahoma. On the day of his demise, Wilson was administered a lethal injection as a means of carrying out the sentence. His final words within 20 seconds of the punishment starting were, quote, "I feel my whole body burning," unquote. However, he showed no physical signs of distress. Wilson's sister, Stacy Wilson, sang a hymn throughout the punishment, including the line, quote, "His soul is resting and it's a blessing," unquote. Wilson's demise marked the end of a long and controversial legal process that had spanned nearly 2 decades since the crime was committed. Number 15. Thomas Knight. The Thomas Knight case is a significant and controversial legal saga that garnered widespread attention in the United States. Thomas Knight, also known as Asakari Abdullah Muhammad after converting to Islam, was a convicted criminal who faced the capital penalty for slayings committed in the state of Florida. The case dates back to the early 1970s when Knight was convicted of the 1974 slaying of Sidney and Lillian Gans, a wealthy elderly couple in Miami. Knight brutally butchered them during a robbery, leaving the community shocked and horrified. He was sentenced fatally for his heinous crimes. Over the years, Knight's case underwent numerous appeals and legal challenges. Notably, he gained attention for his outspoken opposition to the capital penalty and his advocacy for prison reform. He argued that the conditions on the row were inhumane and amounted to cruel and unusual punishment. Knight's case became a focal point in the broader national debate over the capital penalty and the treatment of inmates on the row. His legal battles brought attention to the lengthy appeals process and the often protracted nature of capital penalty cases. In 1987, after spending more than a decade on the row, Knight was put down by lethal injection in Florida State Prison. "No" is all Knight muttered when a corrections official asked if he had any last words. Number 14. Martez Abram. Martez Abram took the stand in Hernando as families of his alleged victims watched surveillance video from that deadly day in 2019, when prosecutors say Abram entered the store wearing body armor, carrying several weapons and opened fire, slaying store managers Anthony Brown and Brandon Gales. Abram told jurors that he takes responsibility for his actions. Days before the shooting, Abram said he had a confrontation with a subordinate and was called into the manager's office. According to Abram, the manager in the room was Brown, and the result of that confrontation was Abram being suspended for several days. Then, on July 30th, 2019, Abram returned to Walmart, shooting and slaying Brown and Gales. He also started a fire in the store using a gallon jug of gasoline he carried into the store in a backpack. Abram, on the stand, said he suffered from memory loss and didn't recall the sequence of events. Abram was also accused of shooting an officer when he tried to leave the scene. The jury found Martez Abram guilty of 2 counts of capital slaying and 1 count of attempted first-degree slaughter after only 55 minutes of deliberation, just hours after Abram took the stand in his own defense.
Did the jury reach a unanimous verdict on each of the 3 counts? Madam Clerk, if you'll please read the verdicts out loud.
Terrell Abram, guilty of capital murder in count 2.
The sentencing was held Friday, December 2, 2022, and the jury sentenced Martez Abram fatally for the 2 capital slaying counts and life for the attempted slaughter count. Number 13. Dennis McGuire. The Dennis McGuire case was a high-profile capital penalty case that attracted significant attention and controversy. Dennis McGuire was a convicted slayer from Ohio who was sentenced fatally for the 1989 exploitation and slaughter of Joy Stewart, a young pregnant woman. McGuire's punishment took place on January 16, 2014 at the Southern Ohio Correctional Facility in Lucasville. It gained widespread media coverage and public scrutiny due to the particular method of punishment used, which involved the administration of a new lethal drug cocktail. The state of Ohio opted to use a combination of midazolam, a sedative, and hydromorphone, a powerful opioid, as the lethal injection for McGuire's punishment. This drug combination had not been used before in a U.S. punishment, and there were concerns about its potential effectiveness and whether it might cause cruel and unusual punishment, violating the 8th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution. During the punishment, McGuire appeared to exhibit signs of distress, gasping, and snorting, which lasted for an extended period before he ultimately completely shut down. "I'm going to heaven, I'll see you there when you come," were Dennis McGuire's last words. The Dennis McGuire case reignited debates about the constitutionality of certain punishment methods and the broader issue of capital punishment in the United States. It prompted further discussions about the need for transparency and scrutiny in carrying out the capital penalty, and sparked additional legal challenges to protocols in various states. Number 12. Edgar Tamayo Arias. The Edgar Tamayo Arias case is a notable capital punishment case that drew international attention and raised significant concerns about the treatment of foreign nationals on capital punishment in the United States. Edgar Tamayo Arias, a Mexican national, was convicted of the 1994 slaying of Houston police officer Guy Gaddis. The crime occurred when Officer Gaddis was responding to a disturbance call at an apartment complex. Tamayo, who was in the United States illegally at the time, was arrested by Gaddis and his partner. During the arrest, Tamayo managed to gain control of Gaddis' weapon and shot him in the back of the head, leading to his demise. Tamayo was subsequently arrested and charged with capital slaughter. He was found guilty and sentenced to the end of life in 1995. The case garnered widespread attention because of the involvement of the Mexican government and international law concerns. Under the Vienna Convention on Consular Relations, foreign nationals have the right to contact their consulates when arrested in a foreign country. However, Tamayo claimed that he was not informed of this right at the time of his arrest, and the Mexican government argued that his rights had been violated. Despite international appeals for clemency and diplomatic efforts by the Mexican government, Tamayo's punishment proceeded on January 22, 2014 in Huntsville, Texas. He was put down by lethal injection and had absolutely no last words. Robert Alton Harris. The Robert Alton Harris case is another significant and highly publicized capital punishment case that took place in California in the 1970s and 1980s. Robert Alton Harris was convicted of the brutal slaughtering of 2 teenage boys, John Majewski and Michael Baker, in 1978. On July 5, 1978, Harris and his brother kidnapped the 2 boys at gunpoint in San Diego. They drove the teenagers to a secluded area, physically attacked them, and then shot them multiple times, leaving them to breathe their last. The crime shocked the community and led to a massive manhunt for the perpetrators. Harris was arrested shortly after the slayings and was found guilty of 2 counts of first-degree slaughter. In 1979, he was sentenced to end, marking the beginning of a long and contentious legal process. Over the years, Harris went through numerous appeals and legal challenges, resulting in a delay of his punishment for nearly 2 decades. The case sparked debates about the efficacy and fairness of the capital punishment system, the lengthy appeals process, and the emotional toll on the victims' families. On April 21, 1992, after exhausting his appeals, Robert Alton Harris was finally executed in the gas chamber at San Quentin State Prison. His punishment was the first in California in 25 years and received widespread media coverage. According to Warden Danielle Vasquez, Harris's last words were, quote, "You can be a king or a street sweeper, but everyone else dances with the Grim Reaper," unquote. Number 9. Gerald Lee Mitchell. On June 4, 1985, Gerald Lee Mitchell abducted and shot Charles Angelo Marino and his 15-year-old brother-in-law, Kenneth Fleming, causing Marino to lose his life. Marino and Fleming drove to Lincoln City Park in Houston to purchase marijuana. Mitchell and another man approached Marino's car, a Trans Am, and offered to sell them marijuana. Mitchell and the other man got into Marino's car and directed him to drive to a house. Mitchell left the car to get a shotgun, which he hid in his warm-up pants. When Mitchell returned, the men drove to a dead-end street where Mitchell pulled out the shotgun, demanded the car keys, and tried to force Marino and Fleming into the trunk. When they refused, Mitchell made them walk to a vacant house. Once inside the vacant building, the second man, who had not been an active participant in the abduction, told Mitchell to take Marino's and Fleming's clothing and leave them there. However, Mitchell shot Marino in the chest, Fleming rolled into a ball, and Mitchell then shot him too. An eyewitness identified Mitchell leaving the vacant house. Mitchell was later arrested in possession of Marino's car and told the police that he shot the two white boys. Mitchell gave a written confession admitting the shootings but claimed they were accidental. The same day he put down Marino, Mitchell shot and ended life of another man, Hector Manguia, when he refused to give Mitchell a necklace he demanded. Mitchell was 17 at the time of the slaying. In April 1986, a jury convicted Mitchell of the capital slaying of Charles Marino and sentenced him to be put down. All of his appeals in state and federal courts were denied. Mitchell was also convicted of attempted capital slaughtering in the Fleming shooting and given a 60-year sentence. He was also given a 60-year sentence for the slaying of Hector Manguia. His last words were, quote, "It's all right, I'm going to a better place," unquote. Number 8. Tommy Lynn Sells. Tommy Lynn Sells was a convicted serial killer who terrorized multiple states in the United States during the 1980s and 1990s. Born on June 28, 1964, Sells was a drifter who drifted from place to place, making it difficult for authorities to track his movements and crimes. Sells committed his first known slaying in 1985, and over the next decade, he embarked on a spree of violence, claiming the lives of numerous victims, most of whom were women and young children. He was known to use various aliases and methods to gain the trust of his victims before attacking them. His crimes were characterized by their randomness and extreme brutality.
Death row for a single murder, but by his own admission, he killed so many people over the years he lost count. And what makes a psychopath tick? And as part of tomorrow night's Nightline primetime series, Secrets of Your Mind,
Or have you killed?
Lord, I don't know. It's up there.
50. When I look at you, I look at hate.
When you look at me, you know what hate is.
Psychopaths are individuals who lack conscience, they lack remorse. Says that we find in the brains of psychopaths is that there's a structural impairment. It was structurally deformed in the psychopaths.
In 1999, Sells was arrested in Del Rio, Texas for the slaying of 13-year-old Kayleen Harris. While in custody, he began confessing to numerous others, claiming responsibility for over 70 slaughters across the United States. Law enforcement officials and investigators were shocked by the extent of his crimes and the number of lives he had taken. Sells faced trial for several of the slayings he had confessed to, and in 2000 he was convicted and given capital punishment in Texas for the slaughtering of 13-year-old Crystal Surlis. Surlis was the lone survivor of an attack in which Sells took life of her friend Kayleen Harris. Crystal's testimony played a crucial role in securing Sells' conviction. On April 3, 2014, Tommy Lynn Sells was executed by lethal injection at the Walls Unit in Huntsville, Texas. When asked if he would like to make a final statement, Sells replied no. As a lethal dose of pentobarbital was administered, he took a few deep breaths, closed his eyes, and began to snore. Less than a minute later, he stopped moving. His punishment brought an end to a reign of terror that had spanned several states and left numerous families devastated. Number 7. Dustin Higgs. Dustin Higgs, an African-American man, was involved in a tragic and controversial legal case that garnered significant attention in the United States. Born on May 5, 1972, Higgs was accused of committing a triple slaying in 1996 on a federal wildlife refuge near Beltsville, Maryland. The incident occurred when Higgs and two of his friends, Willis Haynes and Victor Gloria, offered a ride to three women, Tangi Jackson, Tamika Black, and Miss Han Chin, after a night out. Instead of taking them home, Higgs drove to the wildlife refuge where Haynes shot all three women fatally. The motive behind the slaying was alleged to be retaliation after one of the women had rebuffed Higgs's advances.
If Dustin was executed, that would be a big injustice if his father.
He cared for all of us.
Just get him in the general population, and then we still have Marilyn here with us. From what I understand, Dustin didn't do the killing. Are going to benefit by taking Dustin's life.
A lot of it I do blame myself for, but I definitely don't want him to be.
In 2000, Higgs was found guilty of kidnapping and slaying charges by a federal jury. He was subsequently sentenced to the capital punishment in 2001. Throughout the legal process, Higgs maintained his innocence and claimed that he was not responsible for the slaying, but rather a victim of mistaken identity. Higgs was executed by lethal injection of pentobarbital at the United States Penitentiary in Terre Haute, Indiana. His last words were, quote, "I'd like to say I'm an innocent man. I did not order the slayings," unquote. He mentioned each of the three victims by name. Number 6. Donald Grant. In 2022, Donald Anthony Grant, age 46, was pronounced deceased at 10:16 a.m. CT at the Oklahoma State Penitentiary. Grant had taken the lives of Brenda McClea, age 29, and Felicia Suzette Smith, age 43, in July 2001, eliminating them as witnesses to his robbery at the La Quinta Inn in Del City. For these heinous crimes, he was sentenced to capital punishment. The process began at 10:03 a.m. and Grant was declared unconscious at 10:08 a.m. before ultimately passing away at 10:16 a.m., as confirmed by the Corrections Department Director Scott Crow. There were 18 witnesses present during the punishment, including news reporters, prosecutors, a police chief, and loved ones of both Grant and his victims. In his final moments, Grant attempted to speak, but a prison staff member stopped him and turned off the microphone after his disjointed words had lasted for 2 minutes. Quote, "Yo God, I got this, it's nothing, no medication, I didn't take anything," unquote. Even after the microphone was silenced, Grant continued to talk, focusing on his family members seated in the front row of the witness room. He stated, quote, "I'm going to go to the universe and then I'll be back. God is here, the true God," unquote. At a certain point during the process, it appeared that tears were rolling down his face, displaying some emotion before his life came to an end. Eileen Wuornos. Eileen Carol Wuornos, an American serial slayer, was convicted of slaughtering 7 men along Florida's highways between 1989 and 1990. Her case was significant as she became the first woman to be executed in Florida since 1845. Born in Rochester, Michigan, Wuornos had a troubled childhood, abandoned by her mother as an infant, and raised by her grandparents. She experienced physical harm from her grandfather and stepfather, which led her to run away from home at the age of 14. In her efforts to survive, Wuornos turned to bodywork and encountered her first victim, Richard Mallory, in 1989. She claimed that Mallory violently exploited her and she shot him, leading to his demise. She then robbed him and stole his car. Wuornos continued her slaying spree, targeting 6 more middle-aged white men who picked her up while she was hitchhiking.
I'm prepared. I'm all right with it. And they covered it up and let me kill the rest of those guys to turn me into a serial killer. Then when I had 3 meetings with Miss Villacorta on it.
So there must have been something in you that was getting you to
Oh,
do
you
that.
are lost, Nick! We're gonna have to cut this interview, Nick. And that was covered up?
She argued that all the men attempted to harm her and she shot them in self-defense. Arrested in 1991, Wuornos confessed to the slaughters and was subsequently convicted of 6 counts of first-degree slayings and given capital punishment by lethal injection in 2002. Her case continues to spark debate over the complex issues of child exploitation, violence against women, and the use of the capital punishment. Her last words, quote, "I'm sailing with the rock and I'll be back," unquote, further illustrate the complexity of her mental state at the time of her punishment. Number 3. Velma Barfield. Velma Barfield, a notorious figure in criminal history, was convicted of multiple slaughters and made history as the first woman to be executed by lethal injection in the United States. Barfield's crimes came to light in 1978 when she was arrested for the slaying of her employer, Stuart Taylor. Investigations revealed that she had been poisoning Taylor with arsenic-laced medications, ultimately causing his demise. This arrest led to the discovery of more chilling revelations as authorities delved deeper into her past. Confessing to several other slayings, Barfield targeted people close to her, including her mother, Lillian Bullard, and 2 elderly acquaintances. She admitted to poisoning them with arsenic for financial gain and to sustain her drug addiction.
A drug nightmare. Days of not knowing where you are or what you've done. I wish that I could take every bit of hurt on myself for the hurt that I've caused so many people. Years of a drug nightmare.
During her 1979 trial, Barfield's defense argued that her actions were driven by addiction and psychological distress, portraying her as a victim of circumstances. Nevertheless, the prosecution presented compelling evidence, including her own confessions, leading to her conviction on multiple counts of slaying and capital punishment. Despite undergoing personal and religious transformation while on Row, Barfield's date drew near. On November 2, 1984, she became the first woman to be executed by lethal injection in the United States. Before her punishment, Barfield released a statement saying, quote, "I know that everybody has gone through a lot of pain, all the families connected, and I am sorry, and I want to thank everybody who have been supporting me all these years," unquote. Her final meal choice was cheese doodles and Coca-Cola. Number 2. Wanda Jean Allen. Wanda Jean Allen's involvement in a tragic crime followed by her trial and subsequent punishment became a deeply controversial and poignant chapter in the history of criminal justice system. Born on August 17, 1959 in Oklahoma, Wanda Jean Allen faced numerous difficulties throughout her life, including a troubled upbringing and a history of mental illness. On December 29, 1981, she committed a heinous act that forever altered the lives of those involved, fatally shooting her girlfriend, Gloria Jean Leathers, during an argument. Allen's trial in 1989 received significant attention due to the complex interplay of her mental health issues and the potential influence of racial bias in sentencing.
Do you believe that God can save you? I think about every day I have a birthday that the victim's daughter should have been here with them today for the holidays to forgive others in order to be forgiven and for him to guide and direct my life. So this situation I have been in right here for 12 years has brought a lot of people together.
Her defense argued that she suffered from diminished mental capacity at the time of the crime, raising doubts about her competency and full understanding of her actions. Despite these arguments, Allen was convicted of first-degree slaying and given capital punishment. Allen's case gained further momentum as her lawyers sought clemency based on her mental health and the potential for rehabilitation. However, despite these efforts, Allen's punishment date drew near. On January 11, 2001, she became the first African-American woman to be executed in the United States since the reinstatement of capital punishment in the 1970s. As Wanda Jean Allen was led into the chamber at the Oklahoma State Penitentiary, she was strapped onto a gurney and made a few final remarks. Quote, "Father, forgive them, they know not what they do," she said. Quote, "That's it," unquote. These were Wanda Jean Allen's last words before her life came to an end. Number 1. Robert Frada. The case of Robert Frada serves as a chilling reminder of the depths of human depravity and the pursuit of justice. On November 9, 1994, in Fort Bend County, Texas, Farah Frada, Robert Frada's wife, fell victim to a brutal slaughtering orchestrated with cold precision. Robert conspired with his mistress, Patricia Blackman, and Joseph Prystash to carry out the crime. Price acted as the gunman, fatally shooting Farah outside her home. The motive behind the slaying was Robert's desire to rid himself of his wife and gain custody of their children. During the subsequent trial, the sinister nature of the crime came to light. Witnesses and prosecution evidence painted a damning picture of Robert's involvement. Black men who had turned against him testified about their affair and the plot to slay Farah. Key pieces of evidence, including phone records and surveillance footage, further solidified the prosecution's case. In 1996, Robert Frada was found guilty of capital slaying and given capital punishment. Scheduled for 2003, Frada's punishment was delayed due to legal challenges.
Justice has prevailed. Freedom has prevailed. The young girl, she still asks for her mother. Mommy, I love you, Mommy. I miss you. That's a lot of torture. That's a hell of a lot of torture.
I cannot wait for the day when I see him laying on that table, waiting to get the injection.
We'll have only two choices, either life in prison or death by injection.
However, on January 29, 2014, after nearly 2 decades of appeals and legal proceedings, Robert Frada was executed by lethal injection. He offered no final words before his punishment. His demise brought closure to a tragic chapter in the lives of Farah's family. And that's all for today's video, folks. We'll see you next time at the next one.